course, from last time, like I said, I think I covered about the background of Egypt. And of course, I talked about the Indus River Valley civilization. I think we had dubbed it that. Then I went into the call about the Aryans, how they took over India. And then I followed that up talking about, what else did we talk about? I think we had talked about the background of Hinduism. I think was most of what we did. And then I did do a little review from last time also as well. So we're going to move on next, of course, to talk about a few other things, of course, today, which are kind of important. Of course, one of you saw the little video I just showed you about the caste system, which is, quite prevalent still in India. It's still kind of a problem they have over there, that part of South Asia. It's something, of course, I do have a definition of kind of what the caste system is. It's kind of like a social system, social strata that is kind of mostly prevalent in India or areas around India, South Asia. It was primarily developed by Hinduism a long time ago. And it divides people based on like their social status, also their lineage, like who they're related to. Also, it does affect like what your occupation is. A lot of times your surnames are even associated with occupations. And it was believed to have originally come into India by the Aryans. When the Aryans came in, took over India a long time ago, several thousand years ago. And it's believed that they developed it because they were trying to divide people into different social strata because I think the Aryans were considered upper class when they originally came in, and you had the other people that were on the bottom. There's debate about where the word comes from. I think it's usually from the Portuguese, I think more or less, or Spanish term, which is casta, actually, which is a Portuguese or Spanish word meaning lineage. I don't know if you ever heard about the system of the casta or caste system that they have in Latin America later, that the Spanish developed, just kind of comparable to it. But it's kind of dividing people into different races, even mixes, things like that. And that's kind of what it did. And the British also called it caste as well, which sometimes they think that term may have originated from the Latin word castus. When you look at castus in Latin, it means actually pure or clean, because I think it was believed that part of why different Hindus were in certain castes or whatever was because the ones that were on the top were more pure, the ones on the bottom were more impure, which had a lot to do with like reincarnation, like the cycle of samsara, where people ended up like good birth versus bad rebirths, stuff like that. In India, they also call it the Varna system, of course. And it's a term that means either color or it could be class, I guess, if you want to translate it that way as well. But that has to also do with people's lineage and social standing and stuff like that. You can see from that slide that how they divide people up into different castes. You look at this here, got put it on the bottom for you too as well, but those are the four main castes and what they're usually associated with each one. The highest one is often called the Brahmin, which of course is kind of like a priestly caste. These are the ones that went back to the religion of Hinduism a long time ago. Kasatriya is like the ruling class, nobility, administrators of the state, people like that would be easily in it. Those two would usually be on top. The rulers were often either called a Raja, which could be like a king or a prince, or also they had what they call Maharajas, which were like great kings, almost like an emperor, basically. Then your Vaishyas, of course, are on the bottom. They're kind of like a middle class type workers, and they're like the skilled type laborers. And then your Shudra are like your servants, your peasants that are the bulk of the population, which are kind of on the bottom. They're kind of like the lower class that they have. And then I'll get to it later. There's also like a fifth caste that they have, which I'll kind of explain a little bit later about that one. But They often separate the different castes based on also what are called jati. It says birth group, but it's more like clan or tribes or community villages that people live in, and people are born to these. And a lot of the jatis reflect their name, like their surname, and all of that. And quite often, whatever your surname was what like your occupation was. Like a lot of your relatives were. Like Gandhi, who was a famous prime minister of modern India in the 20th century. The name Gandhi actually meant perfume seller, so it's considered a jati. Dhobi meant washerman. You can see that one there. Shrivastava meant military scribe. So all these kind of link back to who you're related to, lineage, and your social standing within the caste system. Hindus also believe that the caste system was developed by the god Brahma, which I haven't talked about yet, which I'll get to in a little bit, which is the creator god in Hinduism. And the belief was that the Brahman developed from the Brahma's mouth, Kasatriya from arms of the god Brahma, Vaishyas came from the god's stomach, and then the Shudras came from the god's feet. That's usually what it is. Then there's a fifth caste they always talk about today that you probably may have heard of. They're often called the Outcasts, or also the Dalit people, is the majority of people that are in the Outcasts. These are people that are kind of outside the main caste system and are usually seen as being what they call untouchables, which is the nickname that they usually call them. They make up a good percentage of the population of India, like close to 16%, which make it close to 200 million people. It's a lot. I don't know if it's that many, but it might be that many people. And most of these people are people that have kind of been rejected by society somewhat, and they're kind of seen as having bad things they did in the past, bad karma, bad rebirths, which is why they think they're there. But it's a lot of its lineage, of course, who you're related to and all that. Like in the video said, they tend to do a lot of these awful jobs like sewage and garbage collectors and things like that. So some of the lowest jobs, that you could possibly, do overall. Now, the caste system, it's actually been banned. If you look at the Indian constitution, it's actually illegal. Can't really do it anymore, but they still do it anyway because it's, I guess part of the culture and traditions, which I guess is linked to Hinduism, all that. So even though it's, been banned and all that, it's still around. It's more prevalent in the rural areas of India, not so much in, say, the cities like Mumbai, or New Delhi, that kind of thing. But it's still pretty much around. And you can't marry certain people from certain castes, certain jati, things like that, and all that. And a lot of people that are on the bottom are kind of like have a hard time trying to, become successful in life or even go to college or something like that. But I think in India, they're trying to help people out and almost trying to create some kind of affirmative action, maybe if you want to call it that, to try to help some of these people at the bottom overall. There's still a lot of reforms to go on that, I think, in India, but I guess they're kind of working on that and trying to modernize the state more as much as they can. All right, so that's stuff about the caste system and all that, which is kind of still around today. Let me go ahead, of course, move on to talk about next the gods, of course, of India that they also have as well. Of course, there's a lot of gods in Hinduism that they do have overall. There might be 1 million gods. I forget how many they have exactly. Somebody told me that before about how many gods they've got, thousands of them at one point. But those are the three main gods that they have the most, that are considered like the supreme male gods that are big, which is often called the Trimurti, or the three forms of Brahman. And of course, they are Brahma the Creator, you see there, Vishnu the Preserver, and Siva the Destroyer. So those are the three which are big. Of course, you see the one there on the slide there, which is famous, is Brahma the Creator. He's the one that's considered the one that created everything. That I guess creates all life, creates all knowledge. They say he's the one that created the Vedas, which is the basis of the Hindu religion. And it's believed that the Vedas, each head or each mouth of that head, you're looking at the four heads of Brahma, or one of the Vedas. Probably associated with the caste system, I'm guessing. Each one of those represents a caste, whatever, in society, Hindu society. And so he's kind of the one that kind of created all their knowledge, writing systems like Sanskrit, supposedly is given to mankind. He does have a wife and consort, which is the supreme goddess Saraswati. So he's part of a trinity of gods, which are kind of, big, Brahma, Vishnu, and Siva overall. You can see, he's not very popular. I had that there on the bottom there, but yeah, he isn't very popular like he used to be. I know in ancient times, it was a pretty big god, but since then, Vishnu and Siva have kind of replaced him as being kind of popular. Then you've got Vishnu, the preserver, as well. He's really the most famous, the most popular of the Hindu gods. You can see there his name is either usually the preserver. They also call him the maintainer. So Vishnu, the maintainer. And he's seen as the god that kind of maintains the universe. So I guess Brahma creates it and he maintains it. So he's considered one of their greatest gods, most prayed to most, I guess, overall. And there are different variations of of Vishnu. You have Rama and Krishna, which are like incarnations or avatars of Vishnu that have come to the earth in human form. So that's part of why he's so popular. So you have different forms of Vishnu overall. And by the way, each one of these gods have a vehicle that they fly around on or ride around on, which I think Brahma had Hamsa, which was like a swan god. Vishnu's got a bird god named Garuda, which I think is a falcon god also as well. And I think Siva's got if you know about this, as Nandi, the famous bull god. So, yeah, you can see there, I'll get to it later, but he's got a wife and consort, the goddess Lakshmi as well. And so, yeah, those are all kind of somehow associated with each other. Then you've got Siva or Shiva as well. Of course, seen as the second most popular god in Hinduism. Siva, of course, is the destroyer god. He's the one who kind of ends life. He's associated with reincarnation and samsara at the end of the cycle of life. So that's why he's also very popular as well. So I think he's considered like the second most popular god associated with Hinduism itself. You can see I just talked about Nandi. Nandi, of course, is the famous bull god in Hinduism, which he rides around on, as his vehicle. He, of course, has a consort and wife too, which kind of debated about which one it is, but Kali or Shakti is usually considered to be like his main consort. Depends on what mythology you read, all that. So those are the three. The three we're talking about, Brahma, Vishnu, Siva, the three main gods in Hinduism. They're the most famous ones anyway. There's also Ganesha, we'll talk about later. It's another male god that's kind of famous as well. So anyway, let me also get into they have also the supreme goddesses that they have as well. Let's see, we have Saraswati, of course, supreme goddess in Hinduism. She's associated with all kinds of things. You can see music, knowledge is the main thing, I know. Arts, math, science, those kind of things. Usually you'll see her with a stringed instrument, playing like a sitar or something like that. She's also Of course, I told you already, like the consort of Brahma, Lord Brahma, and she's often seen with 4 arms. I think in the 10 o'clock, I kind of mentioned a little bit about the swastika, something that is associated with Hinduism, and also a lot of Eastern religions like Buddhism and Jainism. Swastika, which you see on that Veda book in front of her, is considered to be an Eastern symbol that's been around for thousands of years. It's actually a good symbol. It was originally a symbol of peace, luck, harmony, those kind of things. And of course, what happened was the Nazis took it and borrowed it, I guess, used it as their own symbol. So I guess they associate with the Aryan race and all that may have come from that region. But that's something that's, I guess sad about that, how that kind of came about. But you'll often find swastikas on temples, like in Asia, all the time. But it has nothing to do with the Nazis. It's just kind of something that happened later on. So that's Saraswati. Then you have another, of course, supreme goddess, which is Lakshmi. Lakshmi, of course, is the supreme goddess associated with mostly like things like luck, fortune, wealth, prosperity, and usually you'll see her in the image of a woman with 4 arms. She's often associated with the lotus plant, which you see quite a lot in India, like along the Ganges River basin and all that. So she's a very popular supreme goddess also as well. She does have this brother named Ganesha you may have heard of, and so-called elephant-headed god, very well known. It's a very popular male god in Hinduism. He's often associated with things like fortune, luck, wisdom, also with, he's kind of like a patron to like culture and art, things like that. He's also a remover of obstacles, not just physically, but maybe mentally or whatever. And like the white elephant, supposedly is a very sacred animal and all of that. So Ganesh is pretty popular. I think he's like the 3rd most popular male god behind Vishnu and Siva, And then one more god I'll briefly just talk about for a few minutes is they have also Kali, or what they call really Shakti. Yeah, Shakti, which is probably the more famous version of her as well. Shakti is really the most popular, like female supreme deity or god with Hinduism. She's, of course, the wife of Lord Shiva, of course, in mythology. Also, Kali is too. They think it's kind of like similar, those two. And she's often associated with like all kinds of things. I know power and time and energy are things that are, of course, associated with her. Destruction, because I guess, death and destruction are kind of similar. They're often associated with Shiva as well. And there's like variations over, like I said, Kali, which are also well known. And it depends on which one you see, but some of like that one right there, I think it's an image of Kali, usually has 8 arms, and I think Shakti has 4 arms. And I think each arm has like a certain symbol which are associated with that particular supreme god. So but they have a lot of gods. That's one thing about Hinduism. They do have a lot. Of course, people always ask me sometimes, like, well, what's the deal with Hinduism? Is it polytheistic or is it monotheistic? It's almost like both. It's kind of seen as polytheistic, but they kind of believe there's like a supreme god or supreme universe that's all part of these gods. So it's kind of like almost like both, more or less. All right, so that's enough about religion dealing with the Hinduism. I need to go ahead and, of course, move on to talk about the next thing today, which is we need to get, of course, a few minutes to talk about the rise of Buddhism, which becomes popular in India and East Asia. Buddhism starts about close to 500 BC. So it started about 2,500 years ago, mostly in northern India. So it's like a religion started as kind of like this Indian religion that kind of broke away from the traditional schools of Hinduism at the time. And it was started by this man named Siddhartha Gautama, was his original name. But he, of course, had a nickname they called him, which was the Buddha. The Buddha. And so he was like this teacher, philosopher. They do think he was like a prince of some type originally. And Buddha is a nickname that his followers called him later, students, etc., of his religion, which meant either the enlightened one or the awakened one. And I'll talk more about what he was trying to do, but Buddhism basically eventually broke away from Hinduism. It became like a offshoot type religion and philosophy, philosophical system, as did Jainism, which kind of broke away from also Hinduism as well. They do think that Buddha was some type of prince, like from the Kasatriya caste that I talked about. And I think I've got some pictures of Buddha or statues of Buddha, which are, everywhere, pretty much in parts of Asia. Anyway, he was from originally northern India, they believe, and they think that he was supposed to be like a king of some type of state, northern India, but he eventually decided to abandon his family and become a monk because he thought that was the most holy way to reach enlightenment later. And Buddha really questioned the cycle of samsara, the rebirth of reincarnation. He believed there's got to be a way for people to stop it, so their souls wouldn't be trapped in it, forever. And so one of the key things that, of course, Buddha tried to do, as you know about it, tried to find some way to end samsara in one lifetime and do it in a spiritual way, spiritual life that he called the so-called middle path or middle way. This is, of course, the ways of right living. He believed that would allow you to, your soul to be liberated. What he called nirvana or nibbana, which is, like I told you, equivalent to moksha, which the Hindus also believe, but they're not sure how long that would take. So Buddha's wanting to try to do this maybe in your lifetime, one lifetime, I guess. So one of the things that Buddha taught, if you know about this, was he taught that one of the keys to it was the path of moderation, which that would be basically that was the key part of the middle way or the middle path to live your life, where you would live your life between two extremes, self-indulgence versus self-mortification. So self-indulgence, would be where you want to have everything, that kind of, all the food you want, and everything you want, all the power you want, all the money you want, versus self-mortification, which would be totally the opposite, where you would not want anything. So he kind of, I think he tried different forms of that. I know he tried self-mortification first, which didn't work. And so he realized there's got to be some kind of middle way between those two extremes. And so he eventually developed a set of teachings, which he started teaching his students and all this, which is the so-called Four Noble Truths. The Four Noble Truths were like the main teachings in Buddhism, which were supposedly developed by Buddha himself. And what it did was it taught people what caused samsara, what caused people to get reincarnated. And it also taught people how to, I guess, reach enlightenment so that they would end nirvana, they would have nirvana, and their soul would be released from the cycle, samsara. So the so-called Four Noble Truths. Now, they usually break it down, into four. So here, four separate ones, which I'll kind of go through real quick and show you how they separate them usually. But the first noble truth, which they all have Sanskritic names that they originally called them a long time ago. First noble truth, of course, is dukkha, which means in Sanskrit, suffering. So what Buddha believed was that samsara, like the cycle of reincarnation, was part of what was causing people to suffer throughout their life. They get, born, they live their life, they die, they get born again and again and again. So they have constant rebirths. And he believes the constant rebirths is what's making everybody suffer and feel sorrow, and so on. So dukkha means suffering. That's what they call the second noble truth. First noble truth, excuse me. Second noble truth is samudaya, which means arising. And he says that the continuous rebirths is caused by people seeking pleasures, physical things that don't last, forever. So they continuously try to find, different things, cravings, desires, physical things, that they want, power, money, whatever it is. And so the more they get this, the more they feel unhappy, and all that. And so their soul suffers, and so on. Third noble truth, of course, Nirodha, ending, of course. That's, and also, I think it's also sometimes translated as cessation. That's the renouncing of your cravings and desires. Not that you get rid of them, which you don't, but that, you're not obsessing over it, wanting your whole life to be about getting possessions, making money and things like that. And he believes that if you do that, that will actually make you more happy. If you don't obsess over this, water over the bridge, and so on. Then they have the last one, which is the fourth noble truth, of course, which is magga, which is path, the path. She's talking about the middle path or middle way. And there's all kinds of names for the fourth noble truth. It's called the Noble Eightfold Path. They call it the middle way, middle path, where you want to call it central path. It's all the same. And it's basically it's a Buddhist path on how to liberate their soul to reach nirvana. And with the Noble Eightfold Path, or middle way, you want to call it that, consists of really 8 practices of certain dharma that you have to follow. And they're often, seen as an image on the so-called Dharma wheel that's well known today, or also called the Dharma Cakra. They call it as well, Dharma Cakra. And basically the 8 dharma we're talking about, which I'll list up here for you if you want, is there's different ways they translate it, but I've got right view, right resolve, which also could be, I guess that's right action, right speech, right conduct, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right meditation. So you have to follow all these different things in your life and live an ethical, life and so on. So I guess there's no middle ground there too much, but so yeah, you're supposed to follow all these, and each one of those spokes is supposed to kind of, be one of those 8. We're talking about one of those 8 dharma. So the belief is, I guess, if a Buddhist follows all this, lives a moralistic life, ethical conduct, and so on, that they believe that they will eventually stop reincarnating. At least that's the theory anyway about it. Now, Buddhism itself eventually spread. It didn't stay in India. In fact, it's not as popular. I think it's mostly popular in Nepal, in northern India, right there. And then over time, it eventually spread to parts of Southeast Asia. And you can see here, primarily, most Buddhists live in China. So especially like in Tibet, there's a lot over there. Of course, ones they haven't kicked out yet, I guess. But yeah, they got them. Mongolia, of course, another area you can see. Southeast Asia, Burma, Laos, Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam, pretty much. Oh, Sri Lanka, you can see off the coast of India, it's got a lot of course. I think it's almost majority I think Buddhists, I think. I talked about China already, Korea and Japan also as well. So the total population of people that practice Buddhism is about 500 million people, 500 million, which is a lot. So it's, I think, one of the largest one of the largest religious and philosophical systems in the world. I think it's fourth, I believe, behind, I guess, Christianity, Islam, and Hinduism. So you can see in that map, too, there's actually 3 schools of thought that they have. They got Vajrayana Buddhism. It's often called Northern Tibetan Buddhism. That's the one that's the most famous one, of course, because of the Dalai Lama, of course, kind of made it famous. Theravada Buddhism, also called Southern Buddhism, which is mostly in the Southeast Asia. And then Eastern Buddhism, which is called Mahayanas in China, Korea, and Japan as well. And Buddhism is this kind of religion and philosophical system that's spread all over the world. It's not just in Asia, but it's spread to the Pacific. All kinds of countries have people that are Buddhist. I see these famous actors and, famous people that kind of converted to it or are part of it as well. So it's all over the place, Buddhism overall. So that's the teachings of Buddha and Buddhism and the development of it in ancient times and how it's kind of spread over time. Now let me also talk about something that kind of is similar to it, but it kind of broke off and was known later. Screen's gone for some reason. Must have got rid of it for some reason. But the other one is called Jainism. I don't know if you heard of that one, Jainism. But Jainism is a religion practiced mostly in India, but it has spread to other parts of the world. I'm going to go to this slide first. Actually, this is a better one. And it's called either Jana or Jan Dharmism. Dharma is what it's called. Yeah, Jan Dharma or Jana Dharma. And it's a type of Indian religion and philosophical system that broke away from also the Hindu schools of thought as well. And I've got a picture there on the right. You can see Mahavira. He was the founder of it. Mahavira was an ex-prince, like an Indian prince. He was some kind of teacher and philosopher that lived around the same time as Buddha did. Maybe they knew each other. I don't know. I'm not sure about that. But they called him Mahavira, or his other name, which is Vardhamana. Yeah, Vardhamana. Jainism was different from Buddhism. They kind of tried like a similar deal where they wanted to try to find this path to in some samsara. But Mahavira favored self-mortification as being the main way to do it, to reach nirvana. The Jains, what they wanted to do was they wanted to conquer their desires, try to almost get rid of them, which amounted to like extreme asceticism. So the term Jain, which is a Sanskritic term, means to conquer, like to conquer your desires, basically. So self-mortification, like I talked about earlier, examples, they wanted to basically use fasting, even extreme fasting, to get there, where they eat very little food. Jains tend to be vegetarians because they're, non-violent. They don't want to eat living things or kill living things. Also, they want to own very little possessions, wear very little clothes, as you see on the right with a picture of no money, not too much money. So almost like live the life of a monk, basically, is what it is, pretty much their lifestyle. So that's a little bit different compared to, Buddhism, which is kind of like a middle path that's in the middle between the two extremes, self-indulgence versus, self-mortification. So they went more to the right of things with the self-mortification and all that. Jainism, like I said, is primarily in India. Maybe 5 to 6 million people practice it, but it has spread to parts of East Asia, even going into Japan, which I think in Japan it's starting to spread into there as well. So stuff like that. So that's Jainism. It's, like I said, not very popular compared to Buddhism, which, like I said, has 500 million people, which is quite a lot, but it's still around as a religion and philosophical system that however started about probably 2,500 years ago, which is when it started. All right, then the last thing I need to talk about lecture-wise, I want to go in for a few minutes and also talk about the so-called Mauryan Empire that developed. And the Marion Empire was the first major Indian empire that formed in India, of the subcontinent. It at one point, I think they believe it was the largest empire that ever formed in India. I think they had some others like the Guptas and others that came later. This one was the biggest. They do think it spread from Afghanistan at one point all the way to the Ganges River basin where the Bay of Bengal is. It's a huge area that it encompassed at one point. It, of course, was in the Iron Age period. So it was an Iron Age empire. It lasted 100-something years, almost 150 years, from about 322 to about 185 BC was the period of when it was around. They believe it formed after the collapse of the Alexander the Great's empire. Alexander the Great, the Macedonian conqueror, had destroyed and conquered the Persian Empire, which reached to the Indus River basin. And so at one point, Alexander the Great controlled like the western part of India. But what happened, if you remember correctly later, which we'll get to about Alexander, he died young, like 32 years old, about 323 BC. And so when he died, his empire broke up. And then they believe that the Indians in that region took that area and formed an empire out of it. That's what happened. They may have been influenced by him, Alexander the Great to create their own, massive empire and all that. And they were later ruled by kings. Like they had a dynasty called the Maurya or Marion dynasty, which took over. It was a family of Indian rulers that controlled most of India in that period. And I told you the word Maharaja is a word that kind of means like great king, basically. So more or less, it's like a king, but more like almost like an emperor is what it really was. So a great king is a king that rules over like a vast empire versus they say a Raja, which is like a prince or a king who might have a small state. Like I said, it controlled a vast amount of territory: Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh. But it was based in the Ganges River basin, not the Indus, because most of India starts shifting more towards the eastern part of India, which I think is more better in that area. Now, they had different rulers. The first major king they had and its founder was Chandragupta Maurya. He founded the Mauryan Empire at the end of the 4th century after Alexander the Great died. And he also founded the dynasty of the Mauryas, the Mauryan dynasty, which is like a dynasty of kings that ruled down to close to the 180s BC. It's believed that Chandragupta conquered a majority of the state, like close to about 80% of it, and he pushed the empire all the way to the Bay of Bengal, which would be more shifted over that way. In the Ganges River basin, Chandragupta would eventually found their main capital along that river, which is the ancient city of Pataliputra, it's called. The ruins of the city still exist. They are actually nearby what is the modern Indian city of Patna, Patna, which is in the eastern part of India. And Pataliputra will later be considered, one of the major cities in India that were part of other empires after that. So it was a capital of, I think, multiple states in India at one point. So Chandragupta was like their founder. They don't know much about his son. Like the second Mauryan king was Bindusara, who was the son of Chandragupta, who came in afterwards, who reigned, I think, in the early part of the 3rd century BC. What they do know is that they believe that the Mauryan rulers between the 4th and 3rd centuries converted to Jainism. So you had some cases where some Indian rulers were of the Jain faith. And there's legends that some of them may have starved themselves to death, because that's something that the Jains believed could lead to nirvana, extreme fasting, which they were known for. And I don't know if he's the one that did that, but I think there's a story about one of them that did that, may have done that. It might be a legend about him. It might not be true, Then you have, of course, Ashoka the Great, of course, their greatest ruler, of course, of the Marion Empire. Yeah, he was their greatest ruler, peak pretty much monarch of the whole Mauryan Empire. He reigned in the 3rd century BC. You can see, of course, that's a picture of him on the right. Right there. And that's his emblem, by the way, in the top middle there above his name. You can see with the 3 lions on it. And that's actually the modern symbol of India today. I actually borrowed it from him, believe it or not. And he ruled over a vast empire. Like if you look at the map here, his empire got pretty huge. It went all the way down to the bottom of India. And he was known for conquests as well. Like under him, he conquered the eastern part of that region, southeastern part, an area called Kalinga, which is on the Bay of Bengal, kind of south of Pataliputra in the Ganges River Basin. And in those conquests, he massacred a lot of people. Like I think they say 100,000 or more may have been killed in some wars that were fought there. And because of that, Ashoka felt bad about that. And if you know about it later, he decided to convert to Buddhism. And so he became a Buddhist, which is true about him. And from then on, Ashoka decided that the rest of his life, he would promote it to trying to spread Buddhism to different parts of Asia. He built shrines to Buddha. He started building temples in India to Buddha. And so that was something that he was mostly famous for. So anyway, that's who he was, Ashoka the Great. And after he died, they had other rulers that followed, but their empire, declined, by the 2nd century BC. And it broke up into like a civil war and eventually into like separate states that were ruled by various kings or princes, I told you, which were called Rajas. That's pretty much the way India is for a while until near the end of the Iron Age. And there is one more period later they do have where India unites again, at least in the ancient period, which is called the Gupta Empire. And that occurred between the 4th and 6th century CE or AD, which is much, much later when this happened. So we're talking like 500 years later, they reunite again into one state. That's often called the so-called Golden Age of the Guptas. So the period of the Mauryans and the period of the Guptas is considered to be, some of the greatest periods of the Golden Age of ancient India at that time. So anyways, kind of talking about ancient India, some of the history behind it, a lot of the religion behind it, of course, today. And a lot of this has, greatly influenced India, overall. So it still is today as a big influence. All right, so that's pretty much it for lecturing on India. I'm going to go ahead and also, I guess we got time here, I'm going to go ahead and review real quick over, of course, the review questions that I have for you, of course. What is the caste system? What is the Hindu name for it? Of course, we just talked about. The caste system is this social system in India that was developed originally in Hinduism, likely by the Aryans a long time ago. And Hindu name or Indian name, of course, they often call it, is the Varna or Varnas system. What are the 4 main castes that are in Hinduism? What are they associated with? You got the Brahmin, just like your priestly caste. Kasatriya is like your ruling caste, nobility, etc., the upper classes. You've also got the Vaishya, just kind of like a middle class working type skilled labor. And then you have the Shudra, which is like your peasants or your servants, your lower classes, who are seen as being outside the system. What are they nicknamed sometimes? The Outcasts, of course, is one of those groups that's kind of outside the caste system, like a fifth caste. And they're often the Dalit people is one group that's often been put into that fifth outcast. And oftentimes their main nickname they're called is the Untouchables. And they talk about the untouchability of them because they're so impure. Three main principal male gods, of course, in Hinduism are, I told you, Brahma the Creator, Vishnu the Preserver, and then you have Siva or Shiva the Destroyer. So that's basically pretty much their main attributes or associations with those. Three main supreme gods, of course, goddesses. They have, of course, Saraswati, often associated with things like knowledge and other stuff similar to it. Lakshmi, associated with like wealth, prosperity, fortune, luck. And then Shakti or Kali is often associated with things like time, power, destruction, maybe death, energy. And then Ganesha is the elephant god, of course, in Hinduism. He's a very popular male god. He's often associated with elephants, like moving stuff around. I told you, wealth, prosperity, luck, fortune. He's also a patron of the arts. And Ganesha is the brother of Lakshmi. Then you have the founder of Buddhism. I told you him, Siddhartha Gautama, of course, whose other name, both these are kind of together. His original name was Siddhartha Gautama, but people called him Buddha, which of course meant the enlightened one, or the awakened one. What is the main goal of Buddhism? It's to find some method, so-called middle path, which can basically allow your soul to stop reincarnating. So Buddhists are trying to find a way to stop the cycle of samsara. That's the whole point, what the whole goal is. And do it, like, I guess, within one lifetime. How did Buddha reach enlightenment? He followed the middle path, or middle way, which is this right way of living between two extremes, between self-mortification and also self-indulgence. The nickname for the fourth noble truth or noble truth eightfold path are the teachings of it. What main teachings that Buddha teach to his followers? That, of course, is the four noble truths, which I kind of covered. And of course, the one that's the most important one is just the fourth noble truth, the last one, which is called the noble eightfold path, is the one that's often called the middle way or middle path, central path, same thing. And that one is the one where Buddhists have to follow 8 key dharma if they want to attain nirvana and stop reincarnating. What empire emerged in India after the collapse of Alexander the Great's empire? Of course, that was the Maurya or Marion Empire, which formed sometime in the 4th century BC. Who was the founder? What was this dynasty called? The founder was Chandragupta Maurya, who was some type of Indian ruler at the end of the 4th century BC. Of course, the dynasty got named after his name, Maurya. So it's either called Maurya or Marion, and it's around till about the 180s BC. Around what major capital along the Ganges River was the center of the Marion Empire? A city called Pataliputra, which is in eastern India along the Ganges River. And it's near a modern city of India called Patna. He was one of the greatest rulers of the Mauryans, the grandson of Chandragupta Maurya. He also the son of Bindusara. That, of course, is Ashoka the Great. He was pretty much their peak ruler who lived in the 3rd century BC. What was he famous for? Ashoka was famous for being like a Buddhist type monarch in India, and he was famous for being a patron to the philosophical religious system of Buddhism. And of course, I told you he spread it. He began to kind of spread Buddhism which eventually spreads into different parts of course, of like East Asia, like China, Japan, and Korea, and Southeast Asia, and also Mongolia as well. So that's pretty much it. Of course, lecturing, of course, on ancient India. Let me know, of course, if you have any questions about this, lecture. Of course, I will be posting this lecture after class. Of course, that really in the afternoon, but make sure to send me comments, questions about it. I will be posting this up on my YouTube channel, though, probably right after, pretty much. It takes about an hour for it to upload it, all that stuff. But I already have the other one at 10 o'clock, so you can go ahead and start looking at that one if you want. And if you want to look at the 1 o'clock later, you can as well. But before I go, don't forget a reminder about completing the online first exam. That is due tonight. So it's going to expire. So, don't forget about that. Try to get that done and all that. Also, don't forget, I do have, of course, a new Canvas quiz up as well, which that, of course, is on the Persian Empire and the history of the Phoenicians and Israelites. So that's going to be due next week as well, which I'll be sending out announcements about that later, about trying to complete that like I always do. But I know that announcement I sent out today on the online first exam, that's going to be pretty much my last one that I'll have. And next week I will also probably, of course, remind students, but I am going to have some makeup period too coming up as well for students that have missed various assignments. So that's pretty much it for this lecture for today. Next week, of course, I'm going to be moving on to talk about ancient China. Getting to that coming up. Probably we'll cover that hopefully in 2 days next week. We do have fall break next week, by the way. I believe it's on Thursday, Friday. I think that's correct. I think that is September what days is that? It's like September 8th and 9th, I believe. No, excuse me, October 8th and 9th, excuse me, is when it is. That won't affect us because I'll be posting lectures on Monday, Wednesdays. Okay, but if you have something, I guess maybe at the end of the week, it might not be, of course, have class with that. So that's it for today. Hope you'll have a good weekend coming up. And so that's pretty much it of this lecture. So y'all take care and have, like I said, a good weekend.